Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe with episode number, could it be 22? It is 22. Emasculata? It's probably pretty close. I thought I had the pronunciation of the entirety of what it really is, but I don't know. That was this morning when I had it in my head and I lost it. But short, we see the title is simply Emasculata. First dropped on April the 28th, just a couple days after my birthday, which just passed. We're getting up there, just a little bit. Of course, this dropped back in 1995. And again, it is episode 22, directed by Rob Bowman, written by Howard Gordon. Another absolutely fantastic episode. Few moving parts to this we'll get into here real quick. This one was delayed a bit because of the release of the film Outbreak, which is interesting. It's interesting how all that stuff works in relation to one another, be it film and film or TV and film or whatever. I doubt movies ever delay themselves as a result of TV stuff, but TV stuff occasionally does. It's interesting. The guest that probably steals the show in here, at least for me personally, was is it Dean Norris, who plays the marshal. He's been in some stuff. I didn't write anything down for this one, but he's been in some things. He's very, very familiar when you see him. And so anyways, Emasculata, it's interesting. This is a Contagion film or show, right? Episode. But at the heart of the Contagion is an insect, and so which is what the title refers to. Now, a few moving parts to this episode. This was a freaking fantastic episode, and this is where I think the X-Files really, if it already hadn't already, really begins to cement its reputation for just, we need more pus, or just the gooey stuff, the gooey stuff, at least in terms of what Chris Carter was allowed. And at times he was forced to go back into that editing room and work hard to bring something down to a point that was acceptable by the execs, right? And I can't remember if he had a hard time with this one or not. I know the one previous he did, but this one, so this is an interesting one, and it's anchored at the end by an incredible, fantastic quote that something Skinner says to Mulder. We'll get to that, which really does lead into, I think, feels like it leads into the last couple episodes. I think we only have 3 left, and season 2 is behind us, and we're wandering into season 3. And one of the things that I look forward to this, there's a lot of things, but one is just, getting ready for that season finale, revisiting that, but then the episode that premieres with the following new season, and revisiting how those things seem to work with one another is just one aspect. But in this episode, we open up deep, I can't remember where that's supposed to be, but deep in the jungle. And we got a guy who is collecting specimens. And it's funny because you see when he opens up his case, he's got a lot of things inside. One of them looks like, it looks a lot like the worm from the episode Ice, which is interesting. There's a few Easter eggs in here, I think, but that's one for sure. Anyways, as he's coming through the jungle, he sees what looks like a group of carnivorous birds feasting on a carcass. It's either dead or at near death, and it's got some kind of infection. And it's it's the beginning moment where you kind of sit back and you say to yourself, "Really, we're going to do this, right?" Well, this guy, man, without apparently he's never watched bloodborne pathogen videos. Because this guy, man, he shoos the birds off and he gets down there and this thing's got boils and, and they're even moving, man. They look like they're just getting ready to burst. All he does is put some gloves on and no shielding, nothing, no protection. He gets right down there, man, and he's just got his hands on it. He's almost coaxing it to burst. I don't know what he's trying to accomplish here, but anyone who has any knowledge of bloodborne pathogens or anything like that, you probably shouldn't. You probably should do this some other way. You're tempting fate, for sure. And so, obviously, to get our episode rolling, this thing just, the pus and everything on his face, and he's just like, it's no big deal, right? Digs down in there and he pulls out an insect, which we find out later he sends off. Now, this is a Pink Pharmaceuticals. It is a pharmaceutical, and they really are the antagonist of this episode. Big surprise, right? Trust no one, especially, you fill in the blank. At times, though, I think we easily can fill it in with big pharmaceutical companies. Seems like we are but one big petri dish for these companies who really could care less about anything except for the bottom line and how much profit they can rake in. And if you really think they really care about the normal average citizen, well, I mean, come on, seriously. It's one of the things X-Files does well, is just really showcase all those elements of society, the bureaucracy and everything else that we really ought to be looked at with some great skepticism, a real critical eye. So big pharmaceutical is showcased in this episode, right? And so what they do is, this guy, man, it doesn't take long that night. You sort of skip ahead to that night, and he is laying there trying to get out a radio transmission for an evac for himself because, well, he's dying, man. He's got this contagion from this insect, which apparently how it works is when the boil, whatever it is, it bursts, it sends the larvae flying, and the larvae dig into you, and they just take, you become the host. And so, and the way it's, the way this contagion works, it spreads, is with, the boils, the areas, once they burst, they got to have a ready-made host right there. And so, that's sort of how this contagion sort of works. And it's interesting. So at the root of it is an insect. And I do have a suggested watch at the end. Didn't think I did, but the more I thought about it, oh yeah, I got that. Anyways, so, he sends, we find out later, he has sent the insect ahead to the pharmaceutical company. And in which case, they come up with this plan, in which case, they want to be able to somehow take for what they can get from this, but they need to experiment real quick to basically speed up the process of being able to utilize this. I can't remember exactly what the end goal is, and utilizing some aspect of what this insect brings to the table in terms of drugs, medication, whatever, treatments. And so what they do is Robert Torrance is the guy who's in the jungle who ends up dying. And what they do is Big Pharma, we find out, sends a package of contaminated meat to a prison to another Robert Torrance in order to basically shield themselves as, it had to have been a mistake. But what they got here is a contained place to basically see this and be able to study it in a closed environment. Well, so there is Mulder and Scully. They get this case, and they don't know why, but they find out real fast as they show up at this prison. They think it's a couple escapees have gotten out of there, and we find out that the real unfortunate aspect of this is they may be contaminated, which means they can spread it, right? And so, but they think it's just that. As soon as they walk into this place, Mulder makes the observation, who are the people in the funny suits? And turns out that quarantine is already happening in this place. And so our heroes will spread, they'll split up, and Scully will stay behind to try to ascertain exactly what's happening in the prison. And Mulder will, see if, I think he says, see if he can't make a nuisance of himself or something, like get in the way, I think is what he says. And with Norris, man, who's just freaking great as Marshall. And so, but ultimately in the end, it's almost kind of like, you never really get a straight answer as to why the powers that be, the cigarette smoking man, Skinner, above them, drop this case down there for Mulder and Scully. It's almost kind of like maybe, on the one side they're the fly in the ointment, and the other, maybe the hope is they're both going to get contaminated and die, and they won't have to worry about them anymore. So anything and everything with the cigarette smoking man is multifaceted. It's multi-pronged, and there's advantages and disadvantages, and there's hopes and expectations that, well, if this doesn't go down like this, it'll probably happen like this, and well, there's advantages all across the board, right? With the cigarette smoking man, there's always a silver lining, right? At least in his own twisted way. And so Mulder goes off, and they get on the trail of these two escaped convicts. Now they get the contagion as a result of getting the job to go into the cell where this guy who receives the package, he becomes contaminated as a result of this meat. And when they are ordered to go in and clean out this cell, of course, they get exposed, which begs the question: how long do these larvae last? In which case, I have an effect. I don't think they ever really give an answer. So Scully gets deeper and deeper. Now, one of the guys who works for Pink Pharmaceuticals initially tells her he works for the CDC. Well, that's whatever you call it. That's a false trail or whatever. Ultimately, he starts to get a conviction of sorts that this probably is not a great thing that they have done, and so he begins to confide in Scully, and along the way, of course, she starts to run into real problems because those there on behalf of Pink Pharmaceutical start to realize the threat that she poses, and so they start to become a real stumbling block for her, and she starts to realize that. I think of the 14 exposed, 10 had already died, so this is a rapidly moving contagion, in which case she is trying to desperately figure out and find out, and she eventually would be put in harm's way, as well as they do from time to time. Breathe a sigh of relief. We know she, will not be exposed or contaminated with this. But the guy who confides in her will ultimately be exposed, and he doesn't have long. And there involves a test just to make sure she's okay. But they are basically incinerating bodies as fast as they can, also collecting data information. So meanwhile, outside, our two guys, the one guy is terribly infected, and he is rapidly just going down. There's a brutal scene too, where early on in the convicts escape, they stop at a rest area, and they're looking for easy transportation. His family stops with their RV, and so, the mom and the two girls go into one side, the dad goes in the other. Of course, one of the guys is waiting for him in there, and he ultimately kills him in order to get their hands on the transportation, which leaves mom and the two girls without a father anymore. And so there's some really brutal elements to this episode working, along with the whole nature and scope of how often has something been released in society and the threat is real, but they keep it away. And so there comes this real question towards the end where, Mulder feels like it's his duty to acknowledge to the public somehow that this has happened in order to keep it from happening again. But Scully even recognizes, look, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, people can die either way with either decision. You either release it and you start a panic, or you don't, and ultimately you're still going to have some people die. And so it becomes a real sort of moral dilemma for Mulder. And ultimately both will find, and there's even a moment where, Mulder will ask Scully, hey, how are you doing? As they're apart dealing with two different aspects of this. And she's like, look, I'm the last thing you need to worry about. I don't want you to worry about me. You need to worry about the task at hand, finding these guys. And once she starts relaying to him exactly what the contagion is and how it spreads, and ultimately in Mulder's side of things, the one guy dies. And ultimately the guy, the one convict, we land in a bus, And ultimately, in the end, he's got a kid hostage, and it is so nerve-wracking because he's got this huge, giant boiler. It's just waiting to pop, and he's got a kid hostage, and the kid is like two millimeters close to this thing, and you're just like, right? And so, Mulder's able to basically talk him down, though, and basically acknowledge to him, like, look, it stops here. You can make it stop here. And finally, the guy relents. Kid gets away. But before Mulder can get a straight answer from him, of course, Big Pharma is there to clean up that part. And the shot apparently is ordered. And before the guy can say anything to Mulder, he is shot right there. And then, of course, the guys in funny suits come rushing in to take the body. And so ultimately, that takes us to the end of the episode. And Mulder, his second face-off with Skinner. First face-off, he goes there to demand some answers, and of course, cigarette-smoking man is there, and him and Mulder get into a bit of a tussle, and that's where some of this moral dilemma really does spring from. The cigarette-smoking man, although he, you can't trust him for anything, but he, basically just says to Mulder, look, how many more people are going to die because you're here not doing your job, and so there's always this sort of give and take. You get to the very end, and that final confrontation where Mulder goes to acknowledge to Skinner that he plans on letting this out. And ultimately, not just Skinner, but Scully comes in and basically with the bad news that, look, they have already, Pink Pharmaceuticals has already done their bit to protect their backside. Really, there's no hope. They've got nothing. And of course, Mulder is just beside himself. And this is so great. I'm not going to get it perfect, but Skinner, as they're about to exit, Skinner goes, Mulder, I'm telling you as a friend, watch your back. This is just the beginning. And the way he says it, the look on his face and how Mulder receives it, it just sends, it just gets the goosebumps thing going, your hair raised up, and man, things were about to get real. These last couple episodes, we're going to get to the finale of season 2, Anasazi, with the great expectation of yet another season unfold. And you just kind of it's just a moment where you're just like, yeah, things just got freaking real. If they weren't real already, right? They just get more real. And that is the continuing aspect of the series that is so great. They continue to, just as things could not get bad enough, somehow they make it worse. And the stakes get higher with each and every season. And it never really seems to outlive itself. You could make an argument that the newest episodes never really capture that lightning in a bottle. But I don't know. If you were in there for the long haul, seasons 1 through 9 especially, and then the new seasons as they were added on, I don't know. I don't think I don't think those two really out-purpose themselves or outlive themselves or whatever. So this is a good episode, man. And there are times, man, where, Dean Norris, the marshal, looks at Mulder just as a stumbling block, it's just like a third wheel to this operation. And yet there are times when Mulder will basically, did you think about this? And he will be able to bring something to the table that will help facilitate and speed up getting to the guys they need to get to. And so, they both play really neat aspects of this case. But ultimately, you have to wonder what was the main motivation to drop him in. So anyways, a great freaking episode. I see where I'm at in time. Great episode. So enjoyable. And I just reviewed this not that long ago on Body Bags, but in terms of an insect and what an insect can do in terms of body horror, if you've never seen this has got quite the effects, man. This gets really gooey and gory, and it is a fun flick, man. It is a real fun flick. So definitely check out Bite as a good suggested watch with Emasculata. And as always, these things are out there, of course. Still, so to be taken advantage of. And obviously, I'm sure it's streaming on some platform. But so until next week, I can't even look ahead right now because this is the last episode on this disc. We get into the last disc of season 2 and head towards the finale. So as always, as I got on my George garb on, go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream.
We might be useful to you.